The Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey says employees are more engaged and like their bosses more than before the pandemic. Federal leaders are using those numbers to strategize what comes next. Emily Murphy's the former administrator of the General Services Administration. Emily, welcome. It's good to see you. What do you make of the numbers from your agency and across government as you go through them?
Well, first of all, Francis, I'm thrilled. It means that we did right by federal employees during a really incredibly difficult time and over the course of the administration. So if you look at the improvement, that didn't all happen overnight. At GSA, we went from a 72 overall in 2016 to 83 in 2020. Our intrinsic work went from 74 to 83. We went from 61 to 78 on leaders lead and 81 to 89 on supervisors that employees trusted their supervisors. I mean, that's a great set of metrics to look at over 4 years. It's especially great when you look at the leap in the last year. And I think it means that we really listened to our employees. We tried to address the needs that they were raising as well as those that we were anticipating, and that we kept acting on the feedback we were getting from them and doing a better job each and every time.
There were two of those numbers in particular I want to ask you about. A colleague in government comes to you, still in, and says, Emily, we need to move leaders lead, and we need to move employees trust their supervisors. What do you recommend to somebody in those particular areas to do to move those numbers? Not going to happen in a year. I agree with what you said there. It's going to take time, but how do you start that process, or how do you turbocharge a process that's already underway?
So with Leaders Lead, I think the real key last year was that we talked to our employees more than we have at any point in time. I was sending out a message a week. I was doing 2 to 3 town halls a week with different parts of the agency. No one in the agency went more than a couple of months without actually having the chance to ask me a question. We really encouraged them to email us, to Allison Brigatti, who was my deputy. So we really did a lot in trying to make sure that there were multiple channels that employees could reach the leaders at GSA. And then we responded to it. We didn't just take that data and we then each and every time we go back and say, here's what we've heard, here's what we're doing in response to it. So I think that was the key in moving the leaders lead number. I would like to say it's because we made all these great decisions on telework and everything else, but I think it was really that we listened to our employees. I think the same thing was true with supervisors. We gave them the authority, we listened to them first of all, and gave them the authority to actually be supervisors. And that they knew we had their backs, but we had their backs in a way where we said, there's a no jerks policy also. And that gave them the ability to go in there and do their jobs. We trusted them, and they lived up to that expectation.
One of the big pieces of your portfolio as administrator was the public building service. I think it gets overlooked because of the emphasis on the acquisition piece, at least in coverage in outlets like mine, way too much. What do you take away from these numbers, especially the telework, the enthusiasm for telework and remote work, about the way organizations should think about floor plans, facilities, the back to the office movement that's likely about to get underway, all of that, Emily?
So if you look at the numbers from pre-pandemic, it said that 55% of employees were not teleworking. If you look at the height of the pandemic, only 20% weren't teleworking. And of those, it was 2% because they didn't receive approval and 2% because they didn't want to. We're now, at the end of the survey, they were back up to 26%. And that was, again, a combination of employees who didn't want to telework, those who couldn't get approval to telework. That came down dramatically from 19% to 4%. And the overall of those who felt they had to be present went from 24% to 18%. What that means overall is that of that 371 million square feet of office space that GSA has, that they don't need as much, and that they could save billions of dollars by reducing that space. But not only save money, it will make employees happier. And it's actually one of the most environmentally friendly things we can do is to encourage telework, because one of the number one drivers of emissions is actually people commuting to and from their offices. So it's better for employees, better for the environment, and it's fiscally very sound.
What do you expect to see as this transition happens? What do you think that a typical, if there is such a thing, what do you think a typical federal workspace, especially a headquarters workspace in Washington, looks like 3 years from now or 5 years from now, Emily?
So if I were in charge, which I'm not, I would think that your federal workspace would be meeting rooms where you could have meetings with the public. You're going to want more of those. You want more SCIF space so you can do classified work that can't be done at home. You want space where you can have private meetings one-on-one with the public as well, or with other government employees. What you need less and less of, though, is your standard workstation and your standard desk or office configuration. So I would see those federal office buildings becoming more hubs for meetings than actually places where people go and just sit at a desk and work.
Emily Murphy, thanks very much as always.
Thank you so much, Francis.